Let's start with some information about Sonya. She actually has a degree in computer animation, a Master of Fine Arts from New York. And I found it interesting that Sonya, who she kind of looks like the combination of Jerry Hall and Stevie Nicks. So if you don't know who Jerry Hall is, shame on you. And if you don't know who Stevie Nicks, double shame on you. But basically, her style is through hand drawn animation, computerized digital color, 3D computer animation. And I found one of the coolest things on her website when I was looking through her vast bio was that she actually worked on one of the better Star Trek movies, The Search for Spock. The first thing I noticed, guys, when I went through the deck was I opened up the packaging and noticed the guidebook. Now, the guidebook is a 68-page reference of everything that you need to know about each one of the cards. Each one of the images, what she felt was going to be a translation for them. She took great care to make sure that that was all specific and relative to the I-ching references as well as the references of the elements that this deck works with all of the time for transformation. The guidebook is a 68-page, chock full of knowledge, breakdown of all of the cards, all of the translations of the cards. She does a great job of cross-referencing each so that you can look those up. She also talks about the 4 elements and how you use those in ordinary, everyday manifestations. Here I'm showing you how I leafed through each one of the cards to get myself familiar, and then also looked at the transformation oracle cards by element chart that shows you how to look at how each element progresses through 11 transformations. With the deck, you can also sign up to be part of her Face group site so you can get information about spreads and also share and swap readings with others that enjoy the deck. So here I'm showing you how I like the borders of the deck as well as the elemental icons. You can see those right away. The rounded corners make for easy shuffling and you don't have to worry about getting stuck by those corners. One of the things that I noticed was the width. It looks like it's a pretty good stock quality so that I can keep it in my purse and not have to worry about it getting damaged. It's pretty slick. One thing I want to show you is it is larger than an average size deck. So it's not as small as the Lenormand deck, but it's definitely bigger than the Stella Tarot deck, which is my go-to deck for everything. So you can't keep it in a small purse, but you could easily keep it in one of your tarot bags. I would recommend getting a larger size bag to be able to store it. So speaking of shuffling, I want to start shuffling right away with this deck. As I mentioned, it's pretty glossy, so the deck cards can slide to and from pretty easily. I can do the side shuffle and look at that distribution throughout. I'm showing you another view of that. Pretty easy to shuffle. I don't have to worry about, even though the size of the deck is so large, I was surprised that it was evenly distributed and also that it didn't fall out of my hands. You know how some of the time you can have a deck where you get some jumpers? I didn't find that at all. Everything is pretty evenly distributed. As you can see, my first shuffling and my first view of the deck goes really well. I'm already liking the striking images. As I begin looking through the decks, I noticed that each one of the cards could stand on its own. It didn't need its other partners to be able to tell the story. Each card was the story, and that's what I found most interesting with an oracle versus a tarot deck. Now that I'm excited about the cards, I picked one card, the Journey card. I put the guidebook, the very well drafted out guidebook together, and I looked up in the table of contents, found exactly where the card was going to be for Journey. They're all alphabetized, so I didn't have to go searching around. Next, I went into her interpretations of the Journey card. And one thing that I noticed that I loved about this card was that her interpretation was spot on. Challenge yourself to navigate and survive alone in strange territory. As a tarot reader, this is a strange territory for me, to be able to look at an oracle deck and discern what the images were meant to be from the artist to the actual reader. I think this is a good beginner deck for someone.
I'm sorry, kiddo, I really am. You have a good soul. And I hate giving good people bad news. Oh, don't worry about it. As soon as you step outside that door, you'll start feeling better. You'll remember you don't believe in any of this fate crap. You're in control of your own life. Remember? Here. Take a cookie. I promise by the time you're done eating it, you'll feel right as rain.
Look at the borders of the cards. You'll see where fire is yellow, forgiveness is brown, the depth of the colors, the generosity, you can see the earthy features that you would see in an earth element. Receptivity, you see the ability to look almost through her and see the other side. Initiation, you see the watery element of the emotion that the person is going through. Intuition, you see a watery element, but I also sense an air. An expansion, you can feel how she is creating. And of course, my favorite journey card. Reflection is another fiery card. You can see how she is using all of that depth of color to tell her story. As a reader, my favorite part of looking at the cards is categorizing them. So I categorize them into elements: earth, wind, fire, air. And I also used associating or coordinating elements that you can see at the top of my spread. So, for example, I used a candle and I used a high John Conqueror. My first spread was probably what you would call a past, present, future spread. With this one, I'm just getting warmed up with the deck, trying to figure out how the deck is going to talk to me. So I pulled 3 cards. The positions really were just to give me an idea of what the deck is going to tell me, how I like working with the deck. And I saw some pretty surprising results. I saw that I had more earth than fire when I first started opening the deck. So I could use something called a significator and pull another card because I wanted to see what if I wanted more information. If I wanted more information, I found that the Oracle deck still worked the same way as a tarot deck. Using a significator is the same as just asking another clarifying question. So I pulled another card for that clarifying question. And using the deck, as I mentioned, this same card could work in either position. So I could either integrate with simplicity when opening up the card, or I could use integration with a fire. So then you have that fire and air to strengthen the relationship, and so on. So what do I mean by that? I mean basically that you can use the descent and also the integration to give yourself some kind of reduction of that air quality, or you could put it with a fire element and make it a more intuitive kickstart. And I like using the actual elements with an elemental oracle deck or an elemental tarot deck. So now I'm shuffling the cards again, getting more of my energy into them. I like to span out my decks to get as much energy as possible. So I love to be able to use all of my table space. Some of the time you might think the same thing too, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now the next spread that I'm going to do is a basic past, present, future spread. My first question is, what is the deck going to do for me? I picked Creativity, the Reverse Trickster, the Strengthen card, and each one of those represents what the cards are going to do for me. Then after a quick shuffle, I formulated a second row, and this row represents what I need to know that the deck is trying to bring into my life. So this tells me something that's lacking in my life. And I enjoyed this part of the deck because it gave me more insight with the elements over what was missing, and I could take that information and a final approach that I have with using different cards, and Oracle decks are no different, is I try to associate what types of herbs I would use with each deck. So for example, with this deck, I would use a lavender or a high John the Conqueror root for its healing properties and protection. I would also use chamomile when I'm working with any of the air oracle cards in the deck, and I would use a fennel for any of the spicier, fiery cards out of the deck, especially those cards that are in the later versions or the deeper letters of the progression. Devil's Claw and Acrimony are important to use, but if you're working with fire, you might want to, or a fire element, I would recommend that you sedate the fire a little bit by using an air or water element. So you see here I have the Acrimony right next to one of the fire cards, and then I have the Devil's Claw. From there, I would do some type of meditation work or portal working with that deck, with those cards. You may say to yourself, well, I don't want to just put a bag next to it. What's another way that I can make sure that it's really connecting? You could take the actual herb and open it up and distribute some of the beautiful petals around that element. The same thing works similarly if you're using a pendulum, or if you want to decrease that fire element. When I was talking about using water, you can easily just put the elemental item next to the card that you're working with to increase or decrease the effectiveness of that card. From there, you continue with your normal oracle divination of using that card to be able to do individually creative work. And I found that the deck was very receptive to individual perception and interpretation and meditation. You could easily have this spread open and do some work on it, or even cross the card with another element to be able to finish up and finish your work. So what does all this mean? So this means that the Transformation Oracle deck is two very shiny stars up. You can find so much information about this deck on her website, but let me just run through the quick items. It's based on elemental elements, based on the I-ching. The little white book is very useful. The shuffling is shiny, will hold up to many readings to come. So I say go out and get it. And by the way, if you're in the Colorado area, reach out to Karen and ask her to stock it at Goddess Isis Books.